I want to start with a very basic question, sir. Sir, why did Supreme Court not allow a CBI investigation on the Hindenburg-Adani case, but insisted that SEBI should be doing it?
This involves financial dealings, right? And especially in relation to the stock market. Because let's look at what Hindenburg was saying. Hindenburg was saying that there's been manipulation of the stock market. There's been, manipulation of the price of the Adani companies. And that's why they were saying that the price-earning ratio was very high. Normally the price-earning ratio of most companies would be in the range of, if they're good companies, in the range of 15 to 25. Currently, because the market is very high, it would be probably higher. But normally that was the range within which it was. But in some of the companies of Adani Group, it was 100, 200, 400. So as far as the stock was concerned, you're getting 1%, 0.5% return. Therefore, the question was, why was the price so high? And if the price was so high, why wasn't the Ministry of Finance or the SEBI, the regulator, why weren't they reacting? Why wasn't the Enforcement Directorate reacting to how come the price was so high? So these were some of the allegations which had to do with the financial sector. And that's why probably, the Supreme Court may have thought that maybe the financial sector regulator, SEBI, should have investigated it because they would have maybe the expertise. Because financial markets are very, very complex. That kinds of interlinkages, and this is one of the allegations that Hindenburg had made earlier in the first report, that there were, related party transactions. Mr. Vinod Adani sitting abroad was investing, and that was not getting counted. Whereas, in the 75% of the holding of the Adani Group in its own company, that probably was exceeded if Vinod Adani's investment is also counted. So that was another problem. Then whenever financial markets are involved, then what happens is tax havens come into play. Because money is transferred through tax havens. There are 90 tax havens in the world, and you can transfer money from one to the other, and they may look later on as normal transaction. What's coming into the Indian stock market may look like a normal transaction coming from Mauritius or from Dubai or something like that. But who's behind it? That is hard to track because this money is moved through the process of layering. Layering means the money goes from one tax haven to the other, from one shell company to another shell company. The shell companies are closed, so it becomes difficult to track. So that's why I think, given all these kind of charges that were there, they probably asked SEBI rather than the CBI, because CBI may not have the expertise to be able to track these financial movements. So SEBI, in some sense, was possibly the better organization to look at it rather than CBI.
Sir, why not the famous Enforcement Directorate? They do it all the time, almost every day, especially when it comes to opposition, of course. But why not Enforcement Directorate?
So they could have also been asked, and maybe they should have been asked. But I think SEBI, because it's to do with the stock market, the accusations were to do with the stock market. So let's concede that maybe, okay, SEBI was the appropriate agency. But the question that arises, which is what, now in the second report the Hindenburg have raised, is how come Hindenburg has been given a charge sheet, whereas SEBI is not investigating the Adani companies? That's what they're saying.
Correct. Before that, I want to ask one more question, sir. Sir, this was February 2023 when SEBI was asked to investigate. They were given 2 months, which assumingly it will be, in fact, I'm sorry, it was March 2023. February is when the PIL was raised. March 23 was when SEBI was asked to investigate. They were given 2 months, which is April, May. SEBI should have provided a report in May. Nothing happened. January 2024, again, there was a PIL. Again, Supreme Court insisted that SEBI should be investigating. Sir, the point isn't that, I know that this is a legal question and I'm asking you, but the point is, I just want to know, sir, isn't that contempt of court? And why is the court giving so much latitude to SEBI? We also saw this in the SBI case when it came to electoral bond. They were also given latitude. Sir, I say latitude to the why are these latitudes given?
So, as you know, the Supreme Court had set up a committee. The committee was to be assisted by SEBI. SEBI was supposed to investigate these 23, 24 charges and then, provide the information to that committee. And the committee was to report to the Supreme Court, right? So there was extra time given because SEBI said that they were having difficulties. and therefore the committee could not come to a conclusion on all the charges that were leveled, right? Then, SEBI was given more time by the committee and by the Supreme Court, but by and large, Supreme Court said that there was really nothing. So they actually exonerated more or less the Adani companies because of the other 22 charges which had been investigated there. But you see, even at that time, it was said that the committee that was set up consisted of people from the corporate sector and the world of finance. And they were not going to look at other wider issues. They were only going to look at narrow technical issues. The wider issues were what were the linkages between the political and the crony capitalism, as it is called, between the political masters and between the companies, and because of which, possibly investigation by SEBI was not taking place. One prime example of that is that when the Hindenburg first report came in January 24th, right, the FPO of Adani was to come on 27 January. So this was done just prior to that, right? And the price of the Adani companies fell drastically. So when the FPO started, the price was already below what the FPO price was. So the question is, why was anybody investing in the FPO? The FPO, because I could go to the market and I could buy the same stock for a cheaper price. And then in the last 2 days, when the retail investors were supposed to invest, the investment was not coming. And therefore, the bigwigs of Indian corporate sector, they invested money and made the FPO successful. But again, the question is that if the price in the market is say 2,700, why would anybody invest at 3,200? Why were these bigwigs investing? So obviously they were under pressure. Some pressure would have been applied on them that they invest so that the FPO is successful. And the very next day, the FPO is cancelled by Adani's. So obviously the agreement would be, today you make my FPO successful, tomorrow I'll return you your money, I will not take the money from you. So there's a lot of manipulation going on. So quite clearly this manipulation had political dimension. It was not just purely technical. So that's why the argument at that time was that the JPC should be set up. The JPC, the political masters did not want to set up because that would have opened up many questions about why is it that if the price earning ratio was so high, why did the SEBI not investigate? Why the ED did not investigate? What were the political connections and so on? So therefore, there's a lot of, problems coming as to when you say, why was SEBI asked? Why did the Supreme Court, delay? Why did they allow, more time to be given? Now, one of the things that the Supreme Court committee said was that there was a law that was changed in 2018. Earlier, you could go behind who are the people who are behind that investor. But in 2018, now it was said that you cannot go behind. So whoever is investing, you cannot go behind them and find out who are the real investors. So that the SEBI had said and the committee had said was a problem. Why SEBI is not able to go behind and find out who are the real investors, right? So that law was changed in 2018. Now, if the JPC had asked, why was this law changed? Then the government would have had to reply, because in the financial markets, as I said, there's a layering process. So whoever is investing upfront is not necessarily the real owner. That is also the problem which is being pointed out in the SEBI second report, because Mrs. Buch and Mr. Buch say that they had invested money that they had earned abroad in a company. Now that company also had people who had earlier associated with Adani. They were running the company. There was also investment from Adani. So it's quite possible it was a nested company. That nested company was actually part of a bigger chain, which was investing money on behalf of the Adanis. So these are suspicions that therefore there was a linkage. So even though Mr. Buch has said that this fellow was a very good friend of mine, he was my class fellow, etc. But these things don't count in a financial transactions. What is important is that you may be building linkage with other bigwigs, by doing this transaction, by allowing your money to also be transacted by the same company. So in other words, these suspicions are there. And recently, Venkatesh, who's a RTI activist and so on, he's come out with this thing about the Pinochet, the Chilean dictator who was prosecuted in London because he was in London, and then they found that one of the judges had a link with Amnesty International. And because of that link, they said that he's a colored person. He's got a bias. Now the
Correct.
House of Lords on that basis overturned the judgment, and therefore Pinochet could not be prosecuted. But the point is that, mere suspicion is good enough. If there's even a suspicion, a judge recuses herself or himself. Here, Mrs. Buch had several kinds of linkages that were being pointed out by the Hindenburg and so on, and therefore she should have definitely recused. And especially when the committee was supposed to be briefed by SEBI, the Supreme Court committee. At that point, she should have revealed that earlier she had some indirect linkages. So maybe, there's no financial irregularity. Even if there's no financial irregularity, this Pinochet principle says that as soon as there's a bias, you have to recuse. If you don't recuse, then that whole process gets, in a sense, vitiated. So, in other words, you see, the way the financial markets are and the way secrecy works, nobody reveals the truth. That's why even if there's a hint of some kind of a link, that is important. And that's why SEBI itself demands complete transparency from the financial institutions it monitors. Because so if SEBI is demanding from the financial institutions and the financial players that they be completely transparent, then SEBI chairperson also has to be completely transparent. So even if there's a hint of some kind of a link with the Adani group, and here, as the first report points out, why is the SEBI not investigating? When the price-earning ratio is so high, when the money is coming, when the related party transactions are there, all this calls for investigation. That's why a narrow technical committee should not have been set up. A JPC is what should be set up. Even now, it's important that a JPC be set up, because even the Hindenburg second report is saying that all this should be investigated, because they're saying these are linkages. We can't go beyond a point to prove the overall point. But once an investigation is done, then they will come up with the truth. So there are two things. One is, as long as there's some kind of linkage, she should have recused herself. Second is that a wider committee needs to go into this entire thing so that the point can be clarified, and only a JPC can actually clarify all the points, not a narrow technical committee. If a second technical committee is set up, even they will not be able to go into various questions that need to be asked.
Stay ahead with our cutting-edge news app. Instantly access the latest shorts in just 1 minute and breaking news in just 50 words. Download now for a smarter, faster news experience.